Welcome, everyone. We have my friend and peer, and even someone I look up to. Yeah, that's a great thing. Rowan Ramsay, welcome, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Nice to see
and
you.
likewise. And the reason that Rowan and I are here today is because when I had James Tripp on the podcast, I asked him at the end after we hit stop, who else should I interview? And for context, in the hypnotherapy Facebook group, there are now 30,000 hypnotists and practitioners and different things in that sphere. 30,000. And James, who probably knows all of them, in the top of his mind, only gave me one name. And Rowan was the name that James came up with. So, welcome, Rowan. Thanks for being here.
Checks in the mail, James.
And the way James introduced you is Rowan is a mesmerist. And that fascinates me. And for those that are listening or watching that may not be aware about Mesmer, and Rowan, you could tell more of the story. Actually, Rowan, why don't you answer that? Who is Mesmer and why do you consider yourself a mesmerist?
So Mesmer was this interesting character, Franz Anton Mesmer, who believed that he'd discovered something new in this idea of a plenum or a universal fluid that permeated and penetrated through the entire universe. And he believed that all illness was to do with blocks in this flow of energy.
Mm,
And so he developed a sort of a method of healing and showmanship, I suppose, in some
mm,
respects, to produce a crisis where the blockage would be removed. And it was my door into hypnosis. My father was an
mm,
energy healer in some
mm,
respects, didn't do it professionally, but he did do it for friends and family. And so there was always an interest in energy and information and
mm,
that side of things. And that's continued through my life. So I think most of the good hypnotists that I see do some form of mesmeric or fascination
mm,
work
mm,
alongside their conventional verbal hypnosis. And I think that there's, if we take mesmer out of the picture, there's this idea of non-verbal communication being a large part of the actual communication between two individuals. So if we're not working with that non-verbal stuff as well as the verbal, we're missing a trick in my
mm,
idea. So
mm.
I
There's
want to focus on
so much to that, man. And I feel that's what's really lacking in those 30,000 people in the community. I feel
it.
just a small portion are doing the nonverbal stuff. Everyone's so fixed on doing the verbal stuff. They're like, oh, it's the words I say that's causing this phenomenon. I'm like, there's something else.
Yeah, it's all about language patterns, isn't it? With a lot of
Right.
like
If I say
certainly,
this word in this way, then miracles will happen. It's like,
yeah,
maybe a little bit more, like you can
yeah,
have the egg, you can have the pan, but you still need to cook.
exactly. And this is the Ericksonian. They took the shell, but they left the nut thing, isn't it?
Exactly. Exactly. Why did Mesmer think that he was the first?
I don't think he thought he was the first. I think
Mm,
if you look into it, I think what was really going on was this was moving from something that was held behind doors in initiatic traditions to something that was being used in the general public. I think Mesmer was really just the first person to try and explain it scientifically.
mm,
Although there is, there's explanations of this before in people like, well, what was his full name? Theodore von Bonheim, whatever his name was,
yeah, yeah.
Paracelsus, as we know him by.
Mm, mm,
So there was other healers using this sort of thing, using magnets, using lodestones, and
mm.
things like that before Mesmer. But he became famous across Europe doing this, didn't he? So
Yeah.
he made the
It's the
mark.
signs. Like when he was it the princes or someone he cured of blindness.
Yeah, there was a blind pianist that he restored the sight to, and she eventually got her blindness back because it was the family income was her being the blind pianist.
Right, right. It's like, darn it, we were making so much more money when you were blind.
But this was, I mean, the early stages of like psychology, a lot of the fathers of modern psychiatry and psychology were using hypnosis and mesmerism to look into the mind and work out what was going on.
Mm,
So if we look at it that way, the science of psychology and psychiatry comes out of the study of the tool of hypnosis rather than hypnosis being something within psychology and psychiatry.
mm,
It's
mm,
older and more ancient and has
mm,
been used in various different forms from suggestive
mm,
healing, suggestive touch.
mm.
And I was talking to James the other day about this idea of what fires together wires together.
Right.
And we know this from the neuroplasticity side of things,
Mm,
but given the fact that your entire body is a central nervous system, it's all neurons connecting everything.
mm,
If we are bringing attention to different energy centers and firing the awareness in those centers, are we wiring them together? So
mm,
instead of looking at things like Mesmer creating a circuit of magnetic fluid through someone's body to clear
mm,
blockages, maybe that connection of those 2 points actually creates a bridge rather than unblocking something
mm.
and creates new wiring rather than unblocking old blocked wiring.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
really like that sort of way of thinking of things. I think there's an old saying, jack of all trades, master of none,
Yeah.
oftentimes better than master of one.
Mm,
And the extension of that saying has always interested me because it seems to me that if you really focus in and niche down on something, you get blinkered by your learning. But if you're constantly
mm,
wondering how this applies to this and how this pulls in
mm,
and
mhm,
seeing everything in a very holistic way and going, this must be connected somehow
mm,
because we're human and everything's
mm,
connected,
mhm,
then how does this puzzle piece fit into the puzzle? So
mm.
that's a big part of how I look at the world and how I work and learn.
And I love that. And it goes back to what you're saying about psychology is just one tool to kind of realize what's going on here and how the other sciences point the same way, whether it's mathematics or I was just talking to someone yesterday studying aerospace engineering
Mhm.
and how part of the formula to make it all work is to realize that air is a liquid.
Mhm.
And you're talking about this fluidity and everywhere, and
Yeah,
it's
it's all fluid dynamics.
yeah.
And I think that aspect of it's, you know, at the end of the day, everything's just energy and information.
Mm,
Matter doesn't really exist. We never touch anything. There's an electron shield between our atoms that we
mm,
never actually come in contact. But on
mm,
a quantum level, even those atoms are just waves of potentiality in
right.
energy and information. So if everything's energy and information, and the thoughts that we create and the intention that we have in the way that we're working as hypnotists is all energy and information,
Yeah.
then if we can produce a monoideistic focus in the creation of that energy and information within our system, does that have an effect on the client that we're working with or the people that we're around?
Mm,
And I think you can
mm,
see this if you go and visit someone who's always in a funk. You
right.
have to, I think we've talked about this before, you have to sort of hold your state quite well, or you get pulled into their funk. And
Mm,
that's because they've got a monoideistic trance around that being in a funk.
mm,
The same thing can be said of that person that's always the life and soul of the party. They have this energy about them that you just have to fall into because they
right.
hold it so strongly. And these
Mm,
are hypnotic focus. These are monoideistic focus states
mm,
where they're holding that energy so powerfully that other people fall into it. And as a
mm,
mesmerist or a hypnotist, one of our jobs is to hold that energy of you are healed. This is a formality. It's done.
right.
There's no question that what I'm doing just now is going to have the desired effect because it's already played out. This moment's been written in time before it happened.
Right. Right.
And that's a big part of what I'm doing with mesmerism.
That's interesting because it reminds me of the Akashic record being that it's already written. And yet, how do we choose which reality we want? So the record is infinite possibility.
Yeah.
So then how do we, whatever we call ourselves, look at the record of possibilities and be like, this is the one I want.
Do you want me to go full woo on here? So, like in my understanding of it, the Akashic records in this moment now is
Mm,
complete.
mm,
Everything's like I had this discussion with a few friends before of what perfect means.
mm,
And perfect means complete for this moment.
mm,
So, me having a broken leg is perfect for this moment. It's
mm,
complete for this moment. I don't have a broken leg just now, but if I did, it would be perfect for this moment. The damage that I've got in my
mm,
lungs is perfect for this moment. It was the perfect for me to get that disease at that moment because it allowed me to grow in the way that I needed to grow in that moment.
mm,
And I think, to sort of go back to your Akashic Records statement question, it's complete, but it's complete for this moment.
mm.
And if we look at time as the evolution of information within the quantum universe, the mind of God, if we want to call it that, and the evolution of God's knowing himself or the universe is knowing itself.
Mm,
I'm a firm believer that the universe is a conscious living entity that's doing what we would call the great work through us.
right.
So each of us as individuals doing our own personal great work of know thyself
Mm,
is allowing the universe to know itself. So it
mm,
needs us to experience what we're experiencing in this moment in time to
mm,
be able to know itself. And that evolution, all the different versions of me through all the different possible
right.
multiverses doing what
Right.
they're doing is allowing that moment now to continuously evolve in the quantum field. So the Akashic
Mm,
records are evolving, but they're also complete and perfect in this
mm,
moment. And all of
mm,
the possibilities, like if the universe comes up with a new idea that it's not thought of somewhere else before, it's going to make that somewhere so that it can experience it.
mm,
So
mm.
if no one's ever thought about a blue elephant with pink spots before, I'm sure people
Right.
have, but somewhere in the universe that now gets created.
Mm,
And I love that idea that this
yes.
universe is constantly spawning new versions of itself in different
Mm,
realities to experience itself.
mm.
Uh, Maybe I'm just a little bit woo-woo, a little bit.
And yet, I love how the science and woo woo are meeting because we talked about the science. Psychology points to what we're talking about, as does mathematics, as does engineering, as does medicine. They're just different ladders to the same outcome.
Yeah. And like, I mean, with medicine itself, there's a fascinating crossover with hypnosis in the placebo.
Mm,
And I was considering this because, like, one of the first placebos is really that Louis XVI investigation into animal magnetism, where
mm,
they test whether the suggested tree causes the trance or the magnetized tree. There's technically a couple of problems with that in that we now know about the Wood Wide Web, the mycelial network that connects all the trees. So
mm,
it's possible that if one tree was magnetized, the whole forest would be magnetized.
mm. Right.
So there's a potential that that energy was real and was there. But if we take that out of the picture, this is essentially the first placebo trial. They're looking at whether
Mm,
this suggestion from a figure of authority saying this tree's been magnetized
mm.
causes the body to fall in trance, and it does.
Or, as you said with the Akashic record, the tree was already magnetized before Mesmer did it.
Yeah, but the thing here is, if we start to look at this, that placebo then evolved into suggestive therapeutics and hypnotherapy. And so hypnotherapy is another, like almost a pseudonym for placebo. They're almost
Mm,
synonymous.
mm,
And they actually say this in the BBC Horizon documentary on the placebo. They say the placebo is like
mm.
hypnosis is like a non-deceptive mega placebo. That's his actual words at the end of the documentary.
A mega a mega placebo.
Yeah, he says you can basically think of hypnosis like a non-deceptive mega placebo.
And that's fascinating because I'm thinking of this study that Baylor University did, a 7-year study
Right.
to kind of flesh out placebo versus hypnosis. And it was done with women with hot flashes. And so the control group got the placebo. They got white noise, and they're told that this contains subliminal messaging that will lower your hot flashes. And the other group got just a hypnosis recording. And both of them were suggested that this will help your hot flashes. And yet the hypnosis was actually superior to the placebo. So I'm just wondering what the effect is there. Why is hypnosis a mega placebo? What's happening in the mind?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. In that documentary as well, they showed that if a doctor says that this is a sugar pill, this is just a placebo, but it'll help you heal, it
Mm,
has almost as good an effect as a genuine placebo pill.
right.
The client
Mm,
thinks that it's a genuine drug.
hmm
And one of the things is like if there's an effect throughout the experience. So if there's side effects to the drugs tend to feel like they're working because you're having side effects, and that increases the effectiveness of the drug.
Right.
And I'm wondering if with these sort of tests where they're testing hypnosis against a placebo, which is essentially just a suggestion as well. So it's hypnosis against hypnosis, just in a different
Right.
form. It's like doing hypnosis against progressive relaxation, as progressive relaxation can be
Right.
hypnotic induction. So what are we testing here? But because the hypnotic suggestion has suggestions throughout that the client can hear, is that the bit that changes it? I think
I don't know. I don't
from my
know. Yeah, it reminds me of this other study. I think it's a book called Healing Hands. And this doctor, he does mesmerism basically on lab rats. So
yeah,
it's not humans. The lab rats are injected with the carcinogen that's known to kill them within 14 days. And yet, just by him putting his hands over the rats with an intention. Now, I think that's the key. Some
yeah,
people put their hand, but with the intention of healing. And several lab rats were cured, or as the medical community likes to call it, spontaneous remission
yeah,
of cancer just because he put his hands on them. He didn't say fancy words,
no,
but scientifically, it's proven that it works.
yeah. And this is actually mirrored in the studies they did on Reiki.
Mm,
The
mm,
initial studies they did with human subjects, because of the expectancy of the subject, they couldn't get a clean outcome. So they had to
mm,
repeat it with animals. And I think it was rats that they did it with. But it turned out that if people believed that they could do energy healing or believed in the attunement that they'd had, they could produce a parasympathetic arousal in the animals. Whereas even if
mm,
they'd been attuned, if they didn't believe in it, they wouldn't produce the effect. So
mm,
again, it goes back to the Marquess de Puyseger's idea of this is will and intent and belief
mm.
that's causing this to be shaped and moved.
And
And
belief is a funny word because, and I'll use you as an example. You're building this fantastic Skool community, and we'll put the links in the comments or links in the description for people to come connect with you. Um, and yet you're talking about the Akashic record, the broken leg. Like you didn't choose to have a broken leg, but
no,
yet you choose to have school. I'm wondering, is it fate or do we actually have choice and agency?
this is an interesting question, isn't it? Like, I mean, there's a wonderful thing in Vadim Zeland's Tufti the Priestess book, where he talks about this, that this moment now has been predetermined.
Mm,
We don't have any agency in this moment now. We only have agency in how we program the next screen of the film. And this is sort of what we're doing, like, the NLP swish pattern that most people
hmm
know about for, things like stopping smoking or stuff like that. What are we doing there? We're
mm,
essentially opening up a pattern of behavior and attaching it to the current patterns of behavior that are there so that they now have a new choice. We can see something really similar in Darren Brown's book, Trick of the Mind. He talks about
mm,
the hypnotic break state. And he talks about it in the context of he's walking down the street and this guy catches his eye. He's like, "What are you looking at?" And
mm,
he starts having a go at Darren. And Darren says something along the lines of like, the wall outside my house isn't it's ye foot high or whatever.
mm,
Ones in Spain, they were about this high, but the one
mm,
outside my house is only 4 foot high or something. And this guy's ended up sat on the pavement crying with him. And I've done
mm,
this. I use a story about a tractor I had when I was a little boy, a little ride
mm,
on tractor. It was blue and red. I loved that tractor, but my dad reversed over it. And what we're doing there is like if someone comes at us with aggression, we've got normally three responses: either
mm,
submission, running away, fear, there's a preset of programs that we can run automatically from that.
Mm.
And then they have a preset of programs that they'll run. So if we go, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to look, they're like, yeah, what, like, shouldn't have been looking, whatever. So they've got a pattern that then plays off the back of the pattern we've played in an automatic back and forth game of tennis, so to speak.
Mm.
But
Mm.
if we give them a pattern that they don't have an automatic response for, that forces them into breaking their state and searching for meaning.
Mm.
And it creates this mini hypnotic trance where they go in and search for meaning. And 9 times out of 10, if I use the story of the tractor with
Mm.
someone that's starting on me, they'll end up telling me stories of the bike they had when they were a kid or something like that.
Right.
Because that's the only pattern that can come up.
Mm.
Now, if we've pre-programmed a pattern in of how we would behave if someone brought up a story about the bike,
Mm.
then we now have an extra choice where most people don't have a choice.
Mm.
So that gives us a little bit more agency, a little bit more choice in how we behave in this moment now.
Mm.
So while Vadim Zeland's sort of right in that we don't have too much in the way of choice in how we react in this moment, we do have choice in how we're going to react in the next moments ahead.
Got
And
it.
that's dependent on the patterns that we have available to us that we've programmed into our mind.
Mm.
So, in order to have more choice in the moment that's about to happen, it's beneficial to understand the different patterns, which are essentially, archetypal energies in some respects
Right.
within our psyche. So if we've got all of the different archetypes from the Jungian archetype set,
Mm-hmm.
then we have all of these different choices that we can play out. We can be the hero, we can be the warrior, we can, you know.
It's a nice plug too for what James is doing as well.
Yeah.
I know
Oh,
in
that's
like a
probably why
couple
it's on
out,
my mind. I think he's doing that.
yeah, a couple hours, he's having a little thing on it.
Yeah, go and check it out if you've not already. It'll
Yeah.
be on his YouTube.
Oh man, it goes back to you mentioned about the healing with the Reiki that it didn't work on humans, yet it worked on mice.
It did work on humans, but the problem with doing a study on it was the expectancy of the clients changed the outcome of the experiment. So they couldn't get a clean read on whether this person that was being
Oh, where,
attuned
yeah.
or this person that
Mm,
believed in Reiki. Because if
mm,
someone comes along that doesn't believe that they can do energy healing, but
mm,
the client believes that the person that's doing the healing on them is a genuine healer,
mm.
then they get the healing response switching on automatically in their system.
Got it. And
And
that's why it's neat with the mice because they had no
yeah, there's no
expectancy.
expectancy.
There's
And
no
like
belief. They don't
the
even know they
same
have cancer.
Yeah, the same sort of applies with the placebo effect. Like there's a pre-screening that happens before trials to test for hypersuggestibility,
Hmm.
and they
Mm.
remove the high suggestibles. But your suggestibility varies from day to day, from hour to hour, depending on
Mm.
things like your circadian rhythms, what the rapport is like with this individual.
Mm.
Like my rapport with you might change from day to day, depending
Hmm.
on how we're interacting.
Right.
So even if it's the same doctor administering the placebo the next day, just because you weren't suggestible yesterday doesn't mean you're not going to be highly suggestible today. Something might have
Right.
changed. Maybe you just knowing him a little bit longer causes that change. Maybe it's a different doctor.
Right. Or me having an argument with my fiance before coming on
Yeah,
this podcast and be like, I have that energy here. And it's like, okay, but this isn't the energy I'm used to with you usually.
Mhm.
And it's
That's
something I
true.
carried into it. It's
Well, hopefully
fascinating.
that's
Yeah,
feedback.
it is. It is. The more we engage in the present moment, the more we realize we have that agency of choice. And
Well,
speaking of agency of choice, then it brings up the word belief in me. So you chose, and we could talk about where the desire comes from to generate the Skool community, and you have a vision of what you want it to become.
mhm.
And we can even say that vision came from the source or inspiration or wherever it came from. Where do desires come from? We could talk about that in a moment. And yet, I find that in manifesting, healing, whatever you want to call it, that as you progress towards the outcome, those bubbles of doubt come up. And it feels like, well, if source or God told me that this is going to happen, why do I still feel doubt?
Yeah. And like, I didn't actually choose to start this Skool community.
It chose you.
Well, like I'd been at Beyond the Veil with Anthony and Manuel and Eric Alexander, Aaron Alexander, Eric Bizansk, and I came back and I opened my computer, logged into Facebook, and the first advert was, "Do you
Mm,
teach hypnosis?" And I just qualified to teach hypnosis. I qualified to teach mesmerism a few years ago,
mm, mhm.
but I just finished my JHA teacher training for hypnosis with Anthony. And it was like, "Do you teach hypnosis? Come
Mm.
on, school." I was like, okay, this is the first advert that appears on my Facebook from coming back after
Right,
Beyond the Veil, which is like a magical
right.
gathering in Berlin. So I checked it out, and school.com/hypnosis was available. So I was just like,
Mm.
done. But I didn't even think about it. It just came up. I was given a suggestion by the universe, and I followed it. You
Right. And then you have those, we'll call them muggles for lack of a better term,
know.
that say, well, it's an advertisement. Like for me, I saw an advertisement for a cat toy. Does that mean the universe is telling me to buy a cat toy?
Definitely.
And there's
That,
another
that,
advertisement. It was just, this one really almost got me, actually. It was just a button. It had no words on it. It was just gray. And all it is, you just press a button. And they're like, does it plug in? Does it do anything? Does it say anything? Does it make any noise? Does it light up? No, it's just a button. And yeah, I'm like, oh, that's fascinating. I almost want to buy it.
it's strange, isn't it? I mean, like, so like I alluded to the fact that I've had an illness before, but like I got that illness after my father passed away. And when I was looking at his life, he'd said something to me that was interesting for me. And it was that I'd never had the discipline to sit and meditate. I'd fallen into meditative trances. And this sort of surprised me because his passport photo when I was a kid was him in his orange robes with a shaved head when he was in India,
Mm, mm,
in a monastery and so forth. And so I started looking into meditation and came across Vipassana and came across a documentary about them using this in jails in America and giving the worst reoffenders in the worst jail in America a 10-day Vipassana retreat, and they all reformed their behavior and carried on
mm.
meditating. And so I looked
What is,
into it.
I'm sorry to interrupt because someone who just earlier week, and this is the synchronous thing of the universe, was talking
Yeah,
about re going back into the prison systems. And so what is this thing that you read? It's talking about the Vipassana and the prisoners.
it was a video documentary, I think, on YouTube, or maybe on, the documentaryfilms.com where all the free documentaries are.
Okay.
Maybe on there that I came across it.
All right.
But I'll see if I can look it out and send you it.
Yeah, and then for those listening, I'll put it on the description
Yeah.
because it's
It,
fascinating.
it
Okay,
was
so
really
sorry, yeah.
interesting. I mean, these guys carried on meditating. Even after they shut the program down, the guys carried on meditating in their cells until they reopened the communal meditation
Right,
platform.
right.
So I found a company in the UK that's doing it, Dhamma Center, big charity in the UK that does these Vipassana meditation retreats. And they were running their first one in Scotland for 9 years that finished on me and my father's birthday, joint birthday in
Mm,
April. And there was one space left on the male side of the course. So I applied
mm,
for it and got it. And like that was the start of me doing what I would say is holding on to my life with a very loose grip. And I know James is
mm,
into this idea of loose grip stuff as well.
mm,
But it's a very good description that like I got the term from him. But it's what I do. Like as soon as I loosened my grip on the world and started just noticing the synchronicities, the next thing I knew, I'd done a 10-day Vipassana. I'd managed to manifest this flat.
mm,
So I bought this in like 4 weeks from offer to acceptance with
mm,
95% mortgage on it.
mm,
Um, Went off and did a 10-day Vipassana, came back, put the keys on the table in front of my brother and my mum, and they were like, I was like, yeah, I bought a flat in Edinburgh. They were like, oh. And then I went off to Nice and did Marco's course on mesmerism. And this is back in 2014. And met a load of cool people who are still friends today. But like, it was letting go of everything and just following
mm,
the synchronicities of life and seeing where they took me next.
mm.
And I've been sort of going in and out of this. Every time I start to tighten my grip on what I think I want,
Yes.
the universe gives me a slap. Every time I loosen the
Damn.
grip again, the universe goes, here, here's something beautiful.
I love and I hate that paradox at the same time because the ego says, I have control. And then when you loosen it, you're like, oh, I never had control ever.
Yeah,
And it's fascinating. And for the people that are listening, this Vipassana is no joke, man. This 10 days. Because the thing that gets me the worst about, not the worst, but the thing that really eats at my ego the most of these Vipassana is that you can't write anything down.
yeah,
So I'll be there meditating in pain. The pain is both physical and spiritual, mental, because it's like the ego's like, oh, you just had a good idea. This will make a best-selling book, or this will be the key to unlock your fortunes, or whatever it is. These ideas pop up, and you're like, oh, I have 9 days left, and how am I going to remember this awesome idea for 9 more days if I can't write it down?
so I threw myself into it, and like the Dhamma Dipa Center in the UK, it's noble silence, so no eye contact as well as complete silence.
Oh, interesting.
And so I took a bell alarm clock, you know, those old alarm clocks that like have
Right.
a couple of bells on the top, and it was set at 3:45 in the morning.
Mm,
And I was waking up. I knew that if I set that alarm for 3:45, I would wake up at 20 to 4 to turn the alarm off so it didn't wake everyone else in the room and annoy them. Because
right.
my subconscious really doesn't like annoying people. So it
Right.
has a tendency
Right.
to like it'll follow my suggestions really well if it means not
Mm,
upsetting other people around.
mm, mm,
So I use that in the sort of the programming of my self-suggestion for this. Because I knew there was one hot shower and I knew I had to be down in the hall meditating at 4 a.m. Now,
right.
we were told we could meditate in our room on our bed, but
Mm,
most of the guys that were doing that were just falling asleep. I was like, no, I'm here to do this. I'm going to go and sit in the hall and not move a muscle and observe the
yeah.
sensations and do everything properly. And day 3 or 4, I was in pain at the end of the day. It felt like my whole body was on fire.
Mm,
Like it was
mm,
literally Super Saiyan flame around me.
mm,
And I just observed myself burning in the fire. And when
mm,
I sat the next day, there was no pain.
mm,
And it was that moment that I realized that the sensations that make up pain
mm,
are not the perception of pain. Pain itself is a triggering of a certain area of the brain due to the perception of those sensations in a particular location and context.
mm,
And what's actually going on is pulsing, heat, tingling, pressure. So that's the four elements. Pulsing's water, tingling's air, heat's fire, coolness would be fire as well,
mm,
and pressure or lightness is earth. So
mm,
we have the four elemental sensations in there in a particular location, like say the jaw, it's toothache.
mm.
Pulsing, pressure, tingling, and warmth somewhere else might be very pleasurable, but
Right.
in the
Right.
jaw, it's pain. So
Mm,
you can see how people's minds get wired up slightly wrong and weird fetishes can arrive and things
right.
like that
Right.
and stuff like that. But once you start to understand that pain is a perception, if you can look through the pain and see the sensations and the elemental sensations that are making up that pain, for me anyway, it completely dissolves the pain. So I
Mm,
can be aware of all the sensations. And, as Elman says, you might feel them working, you might feel a bit of pressure, but it just won't bother you at all.
right.
And that's him doing that through his hypnotic language. He's
Mm,
essentially bypassing the perception and telling them what the sensations will be and that it won't bother them.
mm. I love all that. And my mind is focused on a word you mentioned, your subconscious. You set the alarm clock
Yeah.
and your subconscious. And then you kind of alluded to what I'll call the source or God giving you a sign about school. So I feel there's two different things. So how do you
Yeah.
distinguish between the subconscious and the voice of God? We'll call it, or the
So
source.
I'm more of the like, I mean, my road into this was Huna.
Mm,
My father gave me Max Freedom Long's Secret Science Behind Miracles as a
mm,
child. I read it. Very difficult to read as a teenager.
mm,
But their model of the conscious, the subconscious, and the superconscious mind, and the idea that the superconscious resides outside the body and has access to the universal field. So it's our bridge to God, if we want to call it that, or the
mm,
universe consciousness, whatever we want to call it. And the idea within that system is that the conscious and the subconscious, or the middle and low self, both reside within the body. So they have
Mm,
access to all of the bodily senses.
mm,
So you can speak to your subconscious and it'll hear you. The high self isn't in the body, it's outside the body, it resides out. So the only way to access the high self is through working with your unconscious, working with your low self.
mm,
And
mm.
through building rapport and working with the low self, working with the subconscious through suggestions, through games, things like that, you
Right.
gain a level of trust with the animal mind, the low self mind. And at
Mm,
that point, it can start to ferry messages between the high self, holy
mm.
guardian angel, whatever you want to call it,
Right.
guides. You know,
Mm, mhm,
there's lots of different names for that aspect that's connected outside the body, but it comes through the subconscious.
mm.
And that's very much the way I look at all of this stuff.
I feel it ties it together too. You mentioned the archetypes, and the Jung talked about the shadow work, and the
Mm.
shadow work is dealing with the different archetypes and giving them games. I like that idea. It's like time for the warrior to come out, time for the lover to come out. Hey, let's see what the magician could do. And I wonder, it. You talk about manifesting in your flat,
Yeah.
and if you don't mind, let's just spend a little time with manifesting because
Yeah.
I think it's cool and it's paradoxical. For instance, you mentioned that loose grip, and then things begin to manifest. That you feel like you put your wish out, you dropped your quarter into the well, you made your wish, and when you say, "I'm not attached to the outcome," then the outcome appears. But when you're like, "Well, we'll say the Bible told me that if I pray, my dreams will come true. So I expect God to give me this miracle," and then it doesn't show up. Like you said, you get slapped in the face.
Mhm.
To me, it's almost like if I ask, and again, the Christian lens, my father for a gift, and I
Mhm.
know he can provide me the gift, why can't I look forward to it actually happening without it being loose script?
So I think you can force that to happen, if that makes sense. So you can get what you're asking for, but you have to be able to ask it in the right way.
Mm,
Um, because the high self that essentially uses its connection, shall we say, with the universe
mm,
to move things and get things to happen for you. So this is a very sort of esoteric spiritual lens here. There's other
mm,
lenses that I can put this in to explain it in completely different frames, like a more scientific frame as well.
mm,
We're talking about reticular activation system. We're talking about smart goal setting here in
mm,
a different set of language.
mm,
But essentially, if we step into something like Tad James's smart goal setting, because he's
mm,
from that Huna school as well,
mm,
and he made an interesting shift in the A of smart. So instead of achievable, he has as if now. So
mm,
it's specific, measurable, as if now, realistic, and time bound. And that as if now is stepping into the memory of the future and creating a visualization of it's already happened.
mm,
It's already here. Now, if I step into the future and see like where I want Skool to be,
mhm,
like as an example, like if I look at that and go, okay, I want to build a community that is essentially on its free tier, a community like a Facebook group where every
mhm,
hypnotist around the world can have
mhm,
access to all of the resources within the group and meet up with hypno buddies to practice or have
mhm,
mentors to help them
mhm,
stay accountable or work through client stuff with and things
mhm,
like that, then from that position as if now, if I look back and go, how did I get here? What that's doing is essentially like it's showing my unconscious all of the little things that I need to do and
mhm,
not do in order for that to manifest. Whether I'm aware of those consciously or not doesn't really matter because my unconscious knows, and it's the part that drives and runs the different patterns of behavior for me.
mhm,
Because all behavior is unconscious, intelligence is conscious language, behavioral language is unconscious language.
mhm,
And this ties into the idea of using behavioral language to speak directly to the unconscious in conversational hypnosis and stuff
mhm,
like that. But in regards to manifesting, like to manifest this flat, like I was
Mm,
next door at my ex-girlfriend's flat, and I was like, I'd like
mhm,
a flat like this, but with the box room intact, so I have a study.
mm.
And a year later, I buy the flat next door with the box room intact, so I have the study. Like that's weird. Like there's no
That is
two ways
weird.
about it. It had
Right.
been on the market for 6 months. I got it for way under the offers over asking price.
Hmm.
Again, weird. But what was I doing through that? Every moment of every second of every hour of every
Mm,
day that I was free to do some visualization on that happening,
mm,
that having already happened, I was putting my energy into that. So I was putting a huge amount of energy into the
mm,
thought form of this being created. I was visualizing the mortgage company getting my application and
mhm,
seeing it and sending it to the underwriters, and the underwriters getting it and
mhm,
seeing it and going, yeah, this is fine, and sending it back to the mortgage guys,
mhm,
and then
mhm.
getting it back and going, yeah, cool, and sending it to my mortgage guy in Edinburgh, and him going, cool, we've got it back.
Yeah.
And the letter from him going to the agents that were selling the house and them
Mm,
approving it and
mm,
sending it back and saying, yeah, we'll take that offer. Everything, every single step of the way I was visualizing
mhm,
as if now. And I went
mm,
from offer to having my keys on a first time purchase in Edinburgh of a top floor flat above a retail property. So in Edinburgh, in Scotland, that means that like most mortgage companies will not lend to you, especially as a first time buyer,
mm,
for a 95% LTV on a partially flat roof
mm,
above a retail property. So
mm,
there was one mortgage company in the UK that would actually lend me a 95% mortgage for
mm,
this.
mm,
So for me to go from offer of like the offers were over 145,000, I offered them
mm.
130. So 15 grand under the offers over price.
Right.
And I got the keys within 4 weeks.
Mm.
That's unheard of in the UK for a first time buyer.
Right. Right. And it's borderline on miraculous.
Yeah.
And
Like,
it's fascinating. And to keep it simple, for instance, the other day I just had this thought. It'd be cool to manifest a $5 bill. I don't know where it'll come from. I just in the next 24 hours. And there's that time component then, which is
mhm.
another part of the topic. But just saying I want a $5 bill. And then the next morning I walk out and there's a $1 bill in my driveway. Now it's my private driveway. It's mine. I don't go around just throwing dollar bills on the ground. I've since I've been living here, I've never seen a dollar bill on the ground. And yet there it is. I had the thought, it felt like a manifestation. I had the belief, what wouldn't that be cool if it happened? And there it was.
Mhm.
Yeah, it was a $1 bill, not a $5 bill. So it's the mystery of the universe there. I felt the playfulness, but then also the doubts. It's like looking around, I don't see any dollars. Is it going to happen?
Yeah. But I mean, like you're saying it there, looking around, is there any dollars? As soon as you start to put in the intent to manifest that $5, what you're doing
Mm,
is you're switching on the reticular activation system to look for $5 or dollar
mm,
bills. Looking for money. Like I was on a beach in Rassay, so this little island off the side
mm,
of Skye in Scotland.
mm, mm,
And I was sat on the beach with a friend and our dog. And across the other end of the beach, I saw this little sparkle in a pile of rocks. And my inquisitive mind was like, that looks interesting. I wonder what
mm,
that is. So
mm.
I walked the full length of this beach. It must have been like half a mile long, this beach.
Yeah.
I got there, and it's a £20 note stuck in the rocks on the side
Mm,
of a beach, in the middle of nowhere, on a remote island in the Scottish
mm,
Hebrides. Like the
mm,
chances of me finding a £20 note anywhere,
mm,
let alone sticking out a rock on a beach in the middle of
mm,
nowhere in a remote
mm.
island, like facing the Atlantic,
Yeah.
is virtually
Yeah.
nothing. Why did I notice that? Like,
Mm,
is it just because I'm hyper aware and curious? And is that because of my reticular activation system? And that like this would be the sort of scientific frame for it. You know,
right.
it's my unconscious is watching out for these things.
Mm,
I've always been told, like when I was young, I used to win a lot of like raffles and things like that. I was always
right. Right.
and I would find money in the street and all sorts of things. I was always finding interesting things. And I was told I was very lucky and very observant.
Mm,
It has that suggestion from my parents that I'm lucky and observant. Darren Brown did a whole show on luck, didn't he?
yeah.
And is that suggestion from my parents that I'm lucky and observant caused me to be lucky and observant?
Mm,
How much of this is chicken and how much of it's egg? Which comes first? Are we
right.
manifesting stuff, or are we just starting to notice the stuff that's
Mm,
available to all of us all of the time if we just
right.
open our eyes? I think it's probably more the latter than the former.
Mm.
So
And
as
so
soon
what are
as
the
you like,
yeah, what are the
like
limits here then? So we're talking about mesmerism. I've seen you
hmm,
do some incredible things. Like for those that are listening, watching, they can go to Skool where you posted this, Ron, where you helped this woman that had this pain in the jaw that she's had for what, 13 years, and then you did
uh,
this
yeah, I think it's
this
like, is it 20 years? I think she's had it. She said,
a long time, and then
yeah,
just in a moment, her pain was gone.
yeah.
And so then the mind starts to wonder, what's the limit? Like we know that through those mice, the cancer was healed, and then that leads to two. So I'll loop back to healing in a moment. But what is the limit? Like, can we regrow limbs? Can we raise the dead?
Um,
Can we walk
Possibly
on
one
water?
day. You
Yeah,
know, like we can walk on water if it's like this steep.
right. Or fill like the old Japanese movies where they just filled it with a bunch of cornstarch and ran really fast.
Yeah, but like there's I like this idea that if the universe is just a mental construct and energy and information at the end of the day, like if we look back at the quantum world, right, the particles that make up the atoms of our universe are constantly phasing in and out of reality. So if a quark or whatever phases out of reality, how does it know to phase back into reality as the same quark?
Mm,
There must be an energy and information blueprint sitting behind the matter, the manifestation within our world.
mm,
And if that's the case, then, like when I got my fungal infection in my lungs,
mm,
one of the things that I was doing was like every moment of every hour of every day, like I recorded it and was just listening to it
mm,
on audio all the time, was a mantra basically saying that every moment of every second of every hour of every day, all of the particles of the atoms of the universe that make up my body are constantly phasing in and out of reality. So there's no reason they shouldn't phase back into a healthy state.
mm,
Now,
mm,
I had a disease I was told by the doctors I would be on meds for the rest of my life. It was
mm,
a lifelong condition. And technically, I've lost a third of my lungs. I have
mm,
COPD in my lower lobes. I
mm,
have early retirement from the doctor to release my pension because it's that bad.
mm,
And I came off the drugs in 2.5 years and went from not being able to hold my breath for a minute to being able to beat a 5-minute breath hold in under a year.
mm,
I'm technically like I'm 47 next month.
mm,
I can do pull-ups with 30 kilograms strapped to me and hold
mm.
my breath for 5 minutes with a third of my lungs missing. I'm defying medicine. The
Yes.
emphysemic holes are shrinking, the scar tissue is removing itself because of the diet and the self-suggestion and everything else.
Mm,
But it's mindset as much as it
mm.
is biohacking, because there's a lot of biohacking going on in what I'm doing as well. You know,
Right.
using
I wonder
diet.
about the time component because we hear stories like Joe Dispenza or even Milton Erickson, and there's a time component, and that I think that's what bothers my ego the most is why does it take so long? We read like Jesus instant.
Yeah, and like in Serge Kahili King's book Instant Healing as well, he talks about this. There's a story of I think it's a female kahuna rematerializing a man's broken leg. And the guy's
Mm,
fallen over drunk and hasn't realized that he's broken his leg.
mm,
And because he doesn't know that he's broken his leg, his subconscious isn't fighting her healing. And she can dematerialize the bone and rematerialize it. And it's a compound fracture out the side of his leg, apparently.
so
And
it broke the skin for
yeah,
people. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
So there's other stories in there of like a guy that gets hit by a surfboard and he has a gash on his head, and by the time he's swum into shore, the gash is healed and there's no mark.
Mm,
And part of it in the way Serge Kahili King talks about it is this idea of like repeating the action that's just happened. So like he talks about he's walking along a coastal path and he
mm,
falls and breaks his fingers or something like that. And they're all twisted and
yeah.
broken. and he repeats the movement and does it without hurting himself in
Hmm.
his head over and over again until the mind can't tell which is real and
Hmm.
which is imagined.
Hmm.
And by replaying the version of it where he didn't break his hand over and over again, it heals itself instantly. And I
Huh.
like this is a big part of so like if you take someone that's having difficulty driving as an example,
Hmm.
they're
Hmm.
super anxious, they're making mistakes all the time.
Hmm.
If they go home and replay the mistakes that they've made that day over and over in their mind,
Hmm.
are they setting up a new pattern of behavior to not make that mistake tomorrow when they go out driving again?
Hmm.
If instead they go home and go, okay, what did I do wrong? Okay, there was an ambulance coming. I stopped in the middle of the road. I should have pulled in. So they imagine instead of stopping in the middle of the road, they run through a few times, pulling their car into
Hmm.
the side of the road.
Hmm.
They're setting up a new pattern of behavior for that to happen.
Hmm.
But if we look at things like the basketball experiment, where they got the teams of basketball players to
Hmm.
imagine shooting hoops and scoring, and those ones that
Hmm.
were imagining shooting and scoring every time got a better overall improvement in their game than the ones that actually went on the court. And like that's telling us that if we imagine something enough times, it'll actually change our physical body. It'll change
Hmm.
the way that we're playing a game. So can we condense that down into an instant?
Hmm.
Why couldn't we?
Right. That's my question. Yeah.
Yeah, like I think the problem is the level of focus and willpower that it takes to produce a thought form that powerful that it overpowers and turns off all of the other stations of the mind.
Hmm.
Because most people's mind is like a radio station with the dial spinning. It's
Hmm.
constantly jumping from station to station, from thought to thought.
Hmm. Hmm.
And like this is one of the things with um, ADHD and attention. So if you look at the old book on hypnotism by George H. Estabrooks,
Hmm.
it has a chapter in there on hypnosis and warfare and covert hypnosis that are removed from the modern publication of the book. And George Estabrooks was allegedly one of the MK Ultra hypnotists or the MK Ultra hypnotist. And in the hypnosis on warfare section, he's talking about creating super spies with covert personalities hidden in their subconscious that comes forward when a trigger word's given. And the reason for that is that at that point, if it's a second personality that's been installed in hypnosis, then the main personality has no knowledge of it. So they can't be
Hmm.
tortured into giving out the secret.
Hmm.
So that's part of his warfare hypnosis stuff. But in his covert hypnosis, he talks about um, he basically says, while it's true that you can't hypnotize someone against their will, we have two problems. One, most people these days have no willpower. And
Hmm.
secondly, if you call it something else like guided meditation, it's easy to bypass someone's critical faculty.
Hmm.
Now, critical faculty, it's a construct as well, so it doesn't really
Right.
say anything. But at the end of the day, how does that apply in our world now? With ADHD spreading like wildfire through the
Hmm.
population, what is that? Children are born without the ability. We don't have the will to direct our focus. The will
Hmm.
hasn't developed yet. And it's the development of the will that allows us to control our attention and focus it on things that are maybe
Hmm.
boring. And we
Hmm.
learn that through games as children, through the
Hmm.
old games, not the new games, not computer games,
Hmm.
not TV and social media. So the development and cultivation of the will is extremely important. And it takes a lot of effort to get to the point where you can hold a thought form for any extended length of time.
Hmm.
It's not an easy game to learn.
Yeah.
And being able to train yourself to hold that dial of the radio station of the mind on
Hmm.
one station permanently for as long as you want it to
Hmm.
is something that needs to be cultivated and practiced. I think in the human race as a whole,
Hmm.
definitely in certain aspects of humanity, we need to cultivate that a little bit more at
Hmm.
least. But in the therapist, in the healer, in the manifester, it needs to be cultivated to an extensive degree.
And I wonder, you're talking about that singular focus, that one radio station, and you going back to the story of your flat. You said
Mm.
you focused on that constantly.
Yeah,
Is it possible to hold two manifestations, I'll call them, at once? The being able to increase the amount you hold your breath to feel that and see that future for yourself, healing your lungs, and doing a flat. To me, sometimes it feels like that's two radio stations.
it is, but I'm not playing them at the same time. I'm playing them at different times.
Mm,
So I might spend a half an hour in the morning doing my breath work and focusing
right.
on that thought form. And a lot of the stuff around the regeneration of my lungs came from a cross association of knowledge. So I'd heard about the Sherpas, the
Mm,
Himalayan
mm-hmm,
Sherpas, having more alveoli in their lungs.
mm,
And I also knew that the placebo things they did with fake oxygen at altitude actually
mm.
increased blood oxygen.
What's that? I
Um,
haven't heard that one. That's interesting.
so yeah, they gave people like canisters of inert gas. I think it was like the like I don't know what it was, but it was just
Yeah,
just normal
nothing.
gas.
Yeah,
Nothing that would affect their blood oxygen, and their blood oxygen went up when they believed they were breathing oxygen.
fascinating.
Yeah, it reduced altitude sickness and improved endurance at altitude just with a placebo gas.
Mm,
So, what's going on there? Maybe it's something as simple as they didn't understand about nitric oxide through nasal breathing at that point, and they were
right.
breathing more nasally because they had a thing on their face or something like that.
Mm,
Who
mm,
knows? There might have been some contributing factor that we didn't think of. It's like in the book on breath that I published last year, there was a bit in there about left and right nostril breathing. And
mm,
they did a study in New Delhi where they linked pranayama through the left and right nostril with sympathetic and parasympathetic arousal.
mm,
But there's a cultural knowledge of the fire and water channel in India. If you did that same study
mm,
in America where there's less knowledge of that culturally, would you have the same results?
mm.
Or is there a subconscious suggestion that the left and right channel causes parasympathetic and sympathetic arousal because of this knowledge of the fire and water channel? Like there's these
Yeah,
things
you
where it
don't know.
looks like a clean
Yeah,
study, but as soon as you step out a level and look at this worldwide,
right.
is it actually a clean study or is it culturally specific?
But then you go back to the mouse study with Reiki, which is
Yeah.
fascinating. And the question that bubbles up for me about that study is, what about the mouse or the mice that did not get healed? Yes, it worked on mouse who had no idea, one, that they had the cancer, and two, they had no idea that someone was trying to heal them.
Mhm.
And a lot of mouse did have that spontaneous remission. And then that muggle energy of me looks at that study and be like, well, if it works, why didn't it work for all of them?
Mm. Yeah, maybe it was just their time. I don't know. I don't
I
have the
don't know.
answers to everything though.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You're close. You're close.
But I
So,
mean, the like with the breath thing, I was looking at that, and then I was like, okay, I came across studies in the ketogenics showing that you turn on stem cells in a ketogenic state,
mm,
especially when you start to dip into autophagy and things like that.
yeah.
And I was doing Wim Hof breathing, which is a
Mm,
retention on the exhale. And I know about the parasympathetic vagus swing that happens on the exhale and the inhale. So as we
right.
inhale, the gas fills up the lungs, so we can do the exchange. So the heart speeds up, pumps more
Mm,
blood through the lungs. As we breathe out, it slows down because there's no point in wasting energy pumping blood through an empty set of
mm,
lungs.
mm,
So it's like, okay, if I do the inhale and the hold there, along with ketogenics and fasting, and do the breath retention there,
mm,
will I essentially create this? Okay, we have gas in the lungs now after I've done the
mm,
exhale with Wim Hof. If I hold on the inhale for as long as I can, the idea, the suggestion I was giving myself, so self hypnosis in here as well,
mm,
was at that point, my body's going to start pumping more blood through the lungs looking for
mm.
oxygen. It's going to go, oh, I can't get oxygen. The guy's still not breathing. What's going on here?
Right,
And it's going to
right.
start using the stem cells that are in my blood from the ketogenic diet to
Mm,
build new lungs.
mm,
And my speed went
mm.
up pretty quickly in how much I could
Yeah,
hold. You know, so I think it was a combination of
yeah.
everything, but it's linking stuff together. That's one of the things I love to
Mm,
do is like
yeah, linking it together.
pulling all this stuff back together. We've been doing a solvay on the sciences for generations now.
Right.
pulling them apart and putting them in their little silos and going, this is psychology, this is medicine, this is,
Right.
and they're one thing. And no one's
Right.
doing the coagula. No one's putting it all back together and going, yeah, but how does it all fit together in one picture?
Mm. Yeah, it seems like we're dividing more than we are uniting. Even like the LGBTQIA, like we're adding more letters, but aren't we all one? That's what baffles me. We try to define these little niche areas like cardiology of different studies of it, and it's all one.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. Like, I did a meditation years ago. That's it's on my YouTube, I think, awareness meditation, where I recorded it for myself to take myself through all of this. Like, I was dealing with anxiety and depression at the time,
Mm,
and I'd had an experience where I realized that I was aware of everything.
mm,
So I was aware of my thoughts appearing and disappearing and losing a
mm,
thought and finding another thought and things like that.
mm,
So I had to be an awareness behind my thoughts. And I was aware of becoming angry or becoming sad or
mm,
so there was an awareness of these emotions rising and falling. So I couldn't be the emotions. I had to be an awareness behind them. And I'm aware of how my persona changes with different people. And it
mm,
does so less now than it used to. But
mhm,
when I was masking a lot when I was younger,
mhm,
I would wear different masks with different people.
mhm, mhm,
And so the fact that I'm aware of those masks appearing and disappearing also means that I'm an awareness behind that. And then I looked at my body and was like, okay, I'm aware of my body. If I lost an arm, would I be less me? No, I'm still me. It's just an
mm,
awareness of this physical thing that is my body. I don't
mm.
say I am the body. I say this is
Right,
my body.
right.
So this awareness lies before that. This is my sex means that I'm not the sex. I'm aware of the sex that my body
Mm,
has.
mhm,
Uh, you know, this is my gender might be different from this is my sex in this modern day
mm,
age.
mhm.
When I grew up, it wasn't. It was pretty much the same. And if you were a
Yeah.
boy, you were a boy. If you were a girl, you were a girl. But people can do what they want. It's their life. Like I don't have
Mm,
no qualms either way. But when we start to look at this awareness and ask, does the awareness have an age?
mm,
Or is it just timeless and immortal? It's
right.
always been there and it always will be there.
Mm,
If we ask, does it have a father, a mother, a brother, a sister, a son, or a daughter? It doesn't, but in a very sort of almost like Plato Timaeus type idea,
mhm.
all of the children of the earth are the children of this awareness. All of the
Yes.
parents are the parents of this awareness. This awareness
Yes.
runs behind everything, it runs through everything.
Right.
Does the awareness have a gender? Does it have a sex? I mean, my body has a physical sex and my
Right.
personality might have a gender,
The
but
awareness may
the
not.
awareness is just the awareness. It's aware of those things, but it's
Mm.
not those things.
And I wonder about, and speaking of awareness, the choice. So you have your awareness has a choice of what it wants to be aware of.
Hmm.
I'm wondering what decides. Like
Well,
we feel, the like I feel like I have a choice. I can either have a choice of bringing awareness to the possibility of manifesting a dollar, or I can have a choice of bringing awareness to my chronic pain.
yeah. And like this is the agency that you're talking about before.
Mm,
Like, where's free will? Free will is in that choice of where we direct our awareness.
mm,
And that direction of the awareness is where the cultivation of the will comes in. Because
mm,
without the cultivation of the will, the awareness is pulled by the suggestions of the world. So you stub your toe, your awareness goes to your toe. But if you're a master of your will, you can say, well, I'm not going to feel that. I'm going to move my
mm.
awareness here. And, there's a really interesting thing in regards to this in relation to hyperphantasics and astral projection of all things.
Yes. It's funny you
So
mentioned that because I was reading on that earlier this week. So please go ahead.
So there's this state in astral projection where you have the astral vibrations,
Hmm.
where it feels like the universe is rattling.
Mm,
And in my understanding and experience of this, what I think is going on is like as I'm lying in bed, my astral body's lying in bed as well. It's
mm,
aligned perfectly with my physical body. Maybe it's
mm,
floating just above or just below me or wherever
mm,
I think
mm,
it might be. But essentially, it's my dream body. It's my
mm,
internal body. It's my internal senses. So there's the physical vision,
mm,
and then there's the inner vision, the
mm.
clairvoyance, the clear vision. Um, so one of the questions, I mean, are you aphantasic or hyperphantasic? Do you see mental images?
I don't think I do. Like it doesn't there I don't see color.
No. So like if I was to imagine ask you to imagine walking on a beach, and like anyone watching this can do this as well. So
Right.
if you
Right.
imagine walking on a beach, can you feel the sand between your toes?
It's funny because my theory is I feel everyone's I'm not saying this word right, the amphi the one where you can't imagine, right? Like I can pretend sand between my toes, but I don't actually feel sand between my toes.
So in that pretending of the sand between your toes,
Mm,
is that pretend sensation that you're pretending to feel between the sand between your pretend toes
hmm
in your feet or in your mental doubles feet?
my mental doubles feet. And it's funny
Yeah.
because until I make the decision, I don't know if it's a white sand or a brown sand. I don't know if
Yeah.
it's coarse or fine until I decide what I want it to be.
So you're in the aphantasic in all senses range.
Mm,
And very similar to me, I can create that, but it happens in my mental double.
mm,
It's not in my physical body, it's in my mental
mm,
double.
hmm
And if someone's hyperphantasic, they'll actually feel the sand. But if you
mm,
then ask them that question, is it your feet or is it your mental doubles feet? 90% of the time they'll say, oh, that's my mental doubles feet. Now,
mm,
I've just created a construct of a mental double for them.
hmm
And they've now been able to separate the feeling in their physical feet from the feeling in their mental doubles feet.
hmm
And then I asked them, can you feel your feet and your socks and shoes on the floor beneath you at the same time as feeling your feet standing in the sand on that beach?
mm,
And at that point, they'll generally go, yes.
hmm
And I'll go, are you feeling them at the same time, or is your awareness switching back and forward really fast between the two? And
mm,
at that point, they'll realize that they only have one point of awareness and it's jumping back and forward between the two.
mm,
And if we're lying in bed at night, falling asleep, and our awareness is switching between our mental double, our dream body, and
mm,
our physical body in roughly the same position in our bed,
mm,
what does that create? It creates a shaking, a
mm,
vibration.
mm,
And this is my theory as to what the astral vibration is actually about. It's the awareness jumping between the mental double and the physical body.
mm,
And like it lets us see how easy someone who's hyperphantasic can step into that astral body if they
mm,
want to. It's just another name for it. Whether that's connected to the world out there or just in their
mm,
own mind, I'll leave them to decide.
mm.
Like everyone has their own opinion on that. I'm not going to say yay or nay in either way. I've had enough experiences to question it myself, but I
Right.
don't know, you know, like
Is it possible for one to walk in total oneness? And the reason I ask that is I'm thinking of where Ram Dass brought his guru Maharaji the LSD, and the guru takes the LSD and is like, I don't, I don't feel any different. And then he takes more of it and more of it and more of it, and feels no different. So I feel like Maharaji was at one with both bodies that you're describing.
you could put it that way, or you could also like so as you're walking up the street, you can do this. This is a really like fun little exercise in
Mm,
perceptual shifting if you want. So as you're walking up the street, instead of walking up the street, move the universe around you.
mm,
And like this first happened spontaneously when I was driving up to see my dad when he was ill with cancer. And I had this almost out of body experience while I was still driving the car.
mm,
Part of my awareness was also looking at the car from above as this stationary thing with the world being moved around me.
mm.
And it allowed me to step into this experience of me moving the entire universe around my consciousness
Mm.
rather than me moving myself through the universe.
Right.
And once you understand the fact that, like, I'm not seeing the world around me, I'm not seeing
Mm.
you, I'm not seeing
Mm.
this computer in front of me, I'm not seeing the
Mm.
room behind me and the room
Right.
behind you. I'm seeing a dream interpretation of that built in my mind. The actual resolution of my eyes is less than a megapixel, apparently.
Mm.
You know,
Mm.
it's like the first phone cameras, and we know how bad they were.
Yeah, the potato phone. Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, if we think of, like, all of the detail, all of the clarity and like beauty that we see in the world, it's actually our mind. I've
Mm.
never watched a beautiful sunset or seen a piece of art or heard a piece of classical music or smelt a
Mm.
rose or tasted chocolate.
Right.
All of those wondrous experiences have been manifestations of my mind based on
Right.
electrical signals coming in through my senses.
Mm.
And once you really get that, you can't not be in that unity.
Mm.
Like that's it. Like I was talking about this with a friend earlier. There's a point when a child realizes that doing this doesn't make the world disappear.
Right.
They can't hide by covering their eyes.
Mm.
And that's where the separation happens, where they realize that I'm separate from this world out there.
Mm.
But that's a fallacy because they're never separate from the world out there. The world out there does disappear when they cover their eyes because it's the
Mm.
world they're experiencing that disappears.
Mm.
Their universe vanishes for a moment.
Mm.
And this idea of, becoming like children, like like you'll never enter the kingdom of heaven lest you become like little
Yes.
children, this sort of idea.
Yes.
When we realize again that this world that we see, this person that we're interacting, like this conversation is six
Mm-hmm.
people. There's the real me, my
Mm.
version of who I think I am, and my version
Mm.
of who I think you are, and
Mm.
vice versa. But in reality, I'm only experiencing my own mind, the dream guided by my senses.
Mm.
And at the same time, on a deeper level of mind, there's the dream body
Mm.
experiencing its own dream. And anyone that's done lucid dreaming and woken from a lucid
Mm.
dream and stayed aware through that waking phase will probably attest to the fact that the dream doesn't stop. The external senses just become so loud that they drown out the dream and you
Right.
lose the dream.
Right.
And this is why sometimes we can, if we stay in the same posture, we can fall back into the same dream.
Mm.
That dream stays there and it keeps running and it's running all day, every day through
Mm.
everything we do on a different level of mind.
Mm.
But this experience of I make this universe, the beauty of this sunset, this art, this
Yes.
person in front of me is all just in my mind,
Right.
allows us to enter a state of unity and complete non-judgment.
Mm.
How can I judge you when I don't see you? I just see a dream version of you that's largely made up by my mind.
Right.
I mean, I'm sort of getting an outline of you based on the movement of my eyes and maybe some blotches of color and stuff, but the actual picture of you that's in my mind is
Right.
definitely not what you actually look like out there because you're
Right.
actually energy and information vibrating at a frequency that I can sort of perceive. you know,
Very
like
Matrix like here. Yeah.
it is. But that's the
And,
reality of how the universe really works.
and if you
And
don't mind, I want to bounce back because it's pinging in my head. We talked about the healing and what you do with mesmerism and what your dad gave you with the Huna. And you mentioned your dad having cancer. And I don't know, you can tell me to steer away if you want, but I
oh no,
wonder,
you're fine.
I see a lot of healers that die of cancer. And I'm wondering, what's that phenomena? Why are they not healing themselves or changing their own
Yeah.
reality
So
or
right, first off, I don't think my father actually died of cancer. His tumors
mm,
were roughly the same size when he passed away 3.5 years after he was diagnosed and given less
mm,
than 3 months to live.
mm,
We put him on um, a couple of different things, the Sillet Budwig protocol, macrobiotic diet. He was doing a couple other things as well. He did carry on smoking,
mm,
but it was only after he started taking oral morph that he started getting very thin and losing his body mass. And he started having stomach cramps, and I believe he was taking more oral morph to deal with the pain of the stomach cramps, not realizing it was actually one of the symptoms of the side effects of oral morph.
Mm.
So a lack of self-education, basically, in the drugs that he was taking. Um, and I think he died from malnutrition rather than cancer.
Mm.
And at the end, I think he gave up. But the really interesting thing with all that was like I was in the kitchen at mom and dad's house when he died. And I was there with my girlfriend at the time, who's a Greek girl. And mom and my brother were up at the cottage hospital with dad. And the phone had been ringing all day. And the phone rang. Like this is the house phone, like no cell phones,
Mm.
like
Hmm.
with names or anything on them. House phones ringing away. And I said to my girlfriend Christina, I was like, "That's my brother. Dad's passed away."
Mm.
And I answered the phone, and it was my brother saying Dad had passed away.
Mm.
And he was like, "Do you want to come and see him?" And I was like, "No, he's here."
Mm.
So I walked up the burn to where he used to sit, and I went up and just sat there for a while with my girlfriend and just
Mm.
said goodbye there.
Mm.
And like weird things like that happen around people's deaths.
Mm.
And this seems to happen over and over and over again.
Right.
Like, my auntie asked me and my brother to go down and visit, and my brother decided that he was just going to go down himself. And when he was driving down the road after he'd passed Edinburgh, he told me. And I had a feeling that I wasn't going to see my auntie again, and she died over
Mm. Mm.
and like these things happen over and over again. But in regards to like cancer, my grandfather was very good. He was an orthopedic surgeon. He was part of the ninth field hospital in Normandy and stuff like that during the war. So a real like
Mm.
proper
Real deal.
surgeon.
Yes, yes, yes.
And he was like, never worry about cancer. If you cut open any old person, you'll find tumors.
Hmm.
Malformed cells happen from the moment we're born to the moment we die. It's whether our body can clear them up and handle them. And that reduces with age. But never be scared of cancer. Cancer is essentially a weak cell that's trying to divide that can't complete the divination process. So it mutates to eat sugar from your blood.
Mm.
And when you look at them like that, you can almost feel sorry for them because they're trying so hard to make you
Mm.
new healthy cells, but they're
Mm.
too weak to be able to do it. So they're mutating themselves to become these monsters that eat sugar
Mm.
from your blood to
Mm.
produce a new healthy cell for you, but they don't manage it. So they keep trying and trying and trying and
Mm.
trying and trying. And from that perspective, it's not so scary, you know? But
Yeah, it's there's a phenomena too where it repeats in the medical field where the person has the tumors, like you say, you cut anyone open and there they are.
mm,
And when they tell them you have cancer, then like 2 months later they die.
mm,
Like they were living their life seemingly healthy. They
yeah,
get this notification from someone in a white lab coat or suit, and then that's their destiny.
yeah. And like in answer to your question, why do the healers die from these diseases?
Mm.
Maybe it's not that they're dying from these diseases. Maybe it's that they're just not scared of dying.
Right.
Maybe that's the real crux of this. Like
Mm.
after facing my own mortality with this illness, like I've had it twice now and
Mm.
almost died twice from the same lung disease. And there's been other things that have led me to almost die in
Mm.
previous stupid things when I was younger and
Right.
stuff like that.
Right.
But these illnesses really, really changed and shaped me in a way that made me realize that it's like I'm not scared of heights. I'm fucking terrified of heights, but I'm not scared of heights. I'm not even scared of falling from great heights. I'm scared of hitting the ground and it being painful, you know?
Right. Right.
It's that moment of impact that scares me. But like, if I was going head first and my brain gets smashed in first, then I'm probably not going to feel that. So
Right.
actually, it's not really an issue. And there's a
Mm.
wonderful protocol that Anthony Jacquin shared with me of, I think it's called the never ending story.
Mm.
You just
I've
ask the
never that.
client, so what happens next? Like,
Mm.
you're scared of heights, you're walking along a cliff top, what happens next? I
Mm.
fall. What happens next? I land on the beach. What happens next? Well, my leg's broken. What happens next? Well, an
Mm,
ambulance comes. What happens? Oh, well, in hospital. What happens next? Well, I'm healed. What happens next? I'm back at home. You know,
mm.
like
I feel most people, when you go down that line of questioning, that if they land on, I fall off a cliff and I die, that terrifies them.
but if you ask them what happens next, they're instantly aware of the fact that they're dead.
Mm,
So they've now transcended death and are an awareness beyond death, and their physical
mm,
body's lying dead at the bottom of their speech, but
mm,
they're still aware of it.
mm,
What happens next? Well, I'm reincarnated.
mm,
You know,
mm.
like I don't know, maybe like my life
Yeah,
force gets absorbed back into the universe.
yeah, yeah.
Whatever your
That's
model of what happens after death could be yours, as far as I'm
yeah.
concerned.
Well, Rowan, I appreciate all the time you spent with us. And in a moment, we'll do a little, I call it a hypnotic gift. I was just wondering if there's something that bubbles up to you when I ask, is there a message that you would like to tell the whole world? What would it be?
I think like the message that I would have loved to hear in my darkest days was probably something along the lines of every single obstacle that you've come up to and faced in your life, you've overcome.
Mm,
And every single obstacle that you come up to in your life, you will overcome.
mm,
Even death,
mm,
there's a point where you're going to stop breathing. We're all going to the same place. We're all going to that 6 foot under in the dirt, whether it's by ash or by box.
mm, mhm,
That's the destination. That's the end goal. And what really matters is this moment now, this journey we're in,
mm,
and doing the best you can do in this moment. And I
mm,
think that's the one thing that would have really helped, along with the understanding of the astrological term depression,
mm,
because it's an astrological term that means the star is below its horizon and not shining. So if
mm,
you, like me, suicidal depression at one point in my life,
mm,
and I realized that I wasn't shining. I was doing a job I didn't like. I was with friends that I didn't resonate with,
mm,
and I let go of all of it and found a new path where I could shine. And I think that's one of the most important things is, if you're suffering from a depression, look at where you can bring yourself back into the sky and shine.
mm. It's
So
beautiful.
that's probably the two things that would have
And
helped
if
me.
and if anyone listening, watching wants to see Rowan shine and maybe get a little bit of their own sunshine from his presence, the links will be in the description for Skool and whatever else. You're always working on something.
I just play.
That's it. You just play. And speaking of just playing, for those that are watching or listening, I hope you can find a little moment for yourself here. We could be safe and undisturbed just for a moment as we begin to be curious and play with what Rowan will present for us now.
Yeah, so we sort of had a little discussion about this before we started, didn't we? Of what could we present? And I think we've touched on the stuff that got me into this in the first place. So I think if we've got time, a little story on how this affected me first might be, or alongside this might be really beneficial. And a little bit of background on this. So as hypnotists, we're taught that we need rapport with someone's subconscious mind. We don't really need rapport with the client, we need rapport with their unconscious mind. We can break rapport with the client as long as we can have that level of authority and rapport with their unconscious. And things like this idea of enclosed cognition is something that I think's really interesting, which is the idea of like, wearing certain clothes changes the way our cognition works. So they did an experiment where they gave someone a lab coat and said it was an artist's coat and their creativity increased. They said it was a doctor's coat and their empathy increased. And they said it was a scientist's coat and their knowledge and reason increased, their logical thinking increased. And the same thing happens when we see someone in a uniform. We give them a certain amount of authority. And this is to do with this sort of enclosed cognition stuff. But one of the things that we're not taught is when we're working with self-suggestion to build that rapport with our own unconscious mind. And I think the people that I've come across throughout my life and career that are very good at self-suggestion have a good level of rapport with their unconscious. And in some schools of hypnosis, they tell you that, look, most of the psychological problems that we deal with are to do with the lack of rapport with your unconscious mind. But very few of them will say you need to learn how to get better rapport with your own unconscious. And through the HUNA system, I came across some games that we can play with our unconscious that allow us to build that rapport. And the first game is asking your unconscious for its name. So in the Hawaiian language, the unconscious is the unhipili, which means the grasshopper jumps about from one thing to the next. Or it also translates, I believe, to universe, unhipili. If anyone knows Polynesian or Hawaiian, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not a native speaker, so I might be well off the mark there, but this is my understanding. And I don't really like the term low self. So you sit somewhere quiet and dark and ask your unconscious, hey, Unhipili, what's your name? And my one brought up this name RJ. And my name's Rowan John, so RJ was my initials when I was growing up. But when it gave me this name, I remembered writing ARJAY on my jars. So the phonetics of it rather than the two initials. And that's logically what a little child would probably do. So its name's RJ, spelled ARJAY. And once you've got that name, you can check and say, okay, is this the name you want to be known by? And you should get a feeling as to whether that's right or wrong. If it feels right, go with it. If it doesn't feel right, don't. Don't necessarily expect an answer in words. It might just be a sensation. And this comes from my dad teaching me to talk to nature and saying, don't expect an answer in words. Get a feeling that maybe you want to speak to that tree and ask for a stick instead of this tree and stuff like that. So very woo-woo, magical, weird hippie in the hills stuff. So the next exercise is then asking your inhipili, your low self, your subconscious for its favorite memory. And this game is best done if you start off by asking it to show you a memory that you maybe don't particularly like, that it has a particular fondness of. And when I asked for this memory with mine, it showed me a birthday. I think it was my fourth birthday party. My dad had made a wooden plane for me that I could barely carry. I had a little propeller and stuff. And, like I lifted it, stepped a few steps, and put it down because it was just too heavy. Got pulled apart a couple of days later, and I think used for firewood or something like that. But it showed me this memory, which was always a bit of a sad memory for me because I'd wanted to play with the plane more, but I just wasn't strong enough. And it showed me the attention to detail that my father had put into this. It showed me the love and care that he'd built this with. And it also reminded me that that was the time where my elder brother decided he wanted to be a pilot. It then went on and showed me like after I'd learned to strip and rebuild engines when I was a teenager, it was about the time my brother wanted to be a mechanic. And whether this is true or not, it seemed to be saying that my brother's been copying me and gave me this idea that I had a very strong emotional bond with both my parents. And, my mom, I was born disabled, so my feet were flat against my shins. So my mom had to push my feet down. So I was getting attention from my mom every day, every night, every morning and night. And I was born on my father's birthday. And my brother had had a difficult birth, so he hadn't had the emotional connection to mum that most children need. So there was this sort of energy within this memory coming through that there was a sort of competitiveness with my brother trying to gain the affection of mum and dad by copying and bettering me at the things that I liked. Whether it's true or not, I'm not sure. It's my perspective in my universe, but this is what came through. So I regularly sit with my unconscious and ask it to show me its favorite memory. And you can do show me the favorite memory of the last month, the last year, the last decade. And the more you work with this, the more rapport you get. So that's the first couple of games in the befriending the low self here. I could give you more, but I think play with those and then come and pester me on Skool and we'll give you the next game if you want.
Yeah, I think that's more than enough to keep people busy. I love the aspect of you continuing that favorite memory in different times. Like,
Yeah,
what's your last, in the last month, in the last 10 years? And I love that the playfulness and curiosity and befriending that.
yeah. And like when you get to that point where you're starting to get that rapport, one of the things that I noticed was happening was like if I got triggered into anxiety in
Mm,
like in a public setting or something, because I used to have really bad social anxiety. Like when I moved to Edinburgh, it took me 8.5 months to go further than the shop under my house and
mm,
3.5 years to get on a bus.
mm,
And my social anxiety was just through the roof.
yeah.
And a lot of the stuff that I've learned has been to deal with that. But it started instead of just having a feeling of being anxious, I would start to have the unconscious giving me a memory as well. And the other benefit of this particular exercise is you start to see the the emotions attached to these memories are coming up from the unconscious. So
Mm,
I am the middle self and I am aware and training the animal mind. So
mm,
this is you becoming the captain of your ship and asking your crew what they like and what they don't like and getting to know them a little bit. And when you get on to the next stage of actually playing games, so like I like playing chess, but my unconscious doesn't. It's
mm,
boring for my unconscious,
mm,
but it's extremely interesting for my conscious mind because it's that logic and reason aspect.
mm,
So you start to get an idea as to what the games it likes and what the games it doesn't like, and you can play with it in that way and give it rewards of okay, if we do this right, we get to play that game that I know you
mm,
like, things like
mm,
that. So it really opens up this dialogue between the conscious and unconscious, but it separates you from that emotional, animalistic part of you. And you
mm,
start to gain a level of control of the beast within you.
mm,
Because we all have the animal within us.
mm.
And it's whether, if you look at the tarot and the strength card, it's she's holding the reins of the lion or
Yeah.
holding its mane. And that's her holding on to her animal and
Mm,
directing it how she wants. This is what we're doing here. We're learning to
mm,
tame the animal. And it's
mm,
the animal that goes and gets the things that we want. It's the one that
mm,
speaks to the high self. So this is
mm.
the first stage of the opening up of the ability to communicate with and integrate your whole mind. This is individuation in Jungian
Mm.
psychology. This is that part of combining everything back into one so it works
Yeah.
synergistically as one unit.
Beautiful, man. Beautiful. Thank you so much again for your time.
Oh,
And of
pleasure,
course,
Ryan.
people can continue to follow this path, going to your school, reaching out to you on your different social media and website. And yeah, you got a lot going on, and a lot of
Yeah,
people can benefit from learning.
come play.
Yeah. Thank you so much again, sir.
Thank you, Ryan. Pleasure.